if you guys are like me, you are incredibly busy right now, and all you have time for in the garden are maybe some little micro projects. I don't have the luxury of taking a whole day on the weekend or during the week to do nothing but work out in the garden. You guys are probably like that too. Plus, it's just simply too hot to be out for that length of time. So what I'm concentrating on today are some little micro projects. And my question of the day is, what micro projects are you working on? And by that, I mean just little things that I can do in small little tidbits of time, but that will give me immediate gratification, make me feel like I'm getting some things done, and give me a little bit of forward momentum going forward, so I don't feel so overwhelmed that there is so much to do. So I call it working in the margins. If I've got 10 minutes here or 15 minutes there that I can sneak away from something that I'm doing, or I need to stretch and get up from my desk or my computer, I can come out and do these little micro projects in those snippets of time. And you guys are probably the same, so let me know what little micro gardening projects you're doing right now. So it's important, I think, to identify your micro projects in advance so that when you do have that time, you can come outside and be efficient and get to work on them. So here is my micro project number one. Look at this beautiful Utopia yew. Well, it was actually one time it was beautiful, and then a 300-pound oak tree limb fell on it and it basically crushed it. But this is how wonderful this Utopia yew is. Look at all of this new growth that it's forcing. This is a Southern Living Plant Collection plant, and I definitely am not going to dig it out and discard it, but I am going to dig it out and transplant it someplace else where it will have more room to do its thing. And because all of these hellebores have gotten so large and so vigorous, as has this Green Mountain boxwood next to it, that it really is unnecessary here. It's superfluous. So my micro project for today, or one of them, is I'm going to dig this out. And yes, even though it's really, really hot right now, this is growing in too much sun. So I'm going to dig it out with as great a root ball as I can, and I'll just put it in the back in a shady location until I have time to replant it. And you guys just need to know your own gardens. But for me, I know that this time of year, I can strategically do these kinds of things without overly stressing the plant. So my micro project number one is to dig this out. And actually, the root ball on it is not so great. I'm running into a stepping stone there. Is not so great that this will be a problem. There's that stone. So, what I need to do, I had a border of flagstone all around my garden, you guys, and then it just kept, my garden kept growing, obscuring the stepping stones. There we go. And so now I run into them in unexpected places. So you can see that it hadn't been there long enough, that the root ball was really prohibitively large. Now what I am going to do is water it really well. And then after I finish up here, I'll take it to the back and probably heel it in somewhere where it will stay nice and moist. So this is kind of a two for you guys. By the way, I watered it well before I dug it out. I watered it again. And then what this does is create kind of a little bit more of that negative space I love so much, because as I said, that was kind of unnecessary. It didn't need to be here. It's also part of my I guess, design objective right now, and that is to make things look less cluttered. So a lot of plants that I had in here earlier that were basically being kind of placeholders, those are getting removed and either passed on to someone else or transplanted someplace else where they will not only be happier. There's that stone there, you guys. This is what I was encountering. It shows how much my garden has changed over the years. But it will not only be happier in another location, but this will all look more sleek and cleaner. So I've got another stepping stone here, and that is what I'm going to put in place. So I had already identified where this stone was. And I'll show you an example of where I also did this earlier. So you can kind of put it in place, and then what I do is I define where it's going to be with my hand hoe. This is one of those Japanese hoes. And you can do this really with any type of stone you want to lay, whether it's in the grass or in your flower bed, and it doesn't take any time at all. What's important to me though is that it's level. Okay, so I've kind of defined where it's going to be, and now I know that I need to take out some of this. I could remove this stone completely to make this job a little bit easier, but because this is just dirt, I really don't have to. There. Now I don't have a level with me, but I can tell that that is actually fairly level enough to be foot sure for when I'm working in the garden. And then I'll come back in here a little bit later. I'll take this excess dirt and put it in over here where this is kind of settled. And now I have not only a more excessive stepping stone than the one behind it, but it will kind of bridge that gap between this stepping stone and that one. So I am happy about that. And it also creates another place that this fall, if I want to plant some pansies, I can. And by the way, you guys, I got another one of these giraffe hose reels for my front yard. Life-changing. These are absolutely life-changing. I think I'm going to get a third one. Thanks to you guys who told me I needed to get a hose link. This is very, very similar. It works great. They asked me to try it, and I'm so glad I did. So, doesn't that look nice, Stuart? Nice, and it makes me feel like I have gotten something accomplished, and it's pretty much of a change. Now, if you come over here, you can see where I did that the other day. This stepping stone here used to be way back in there. And what I did was just move it forward, so now it's more practical. And there's more negative space around it and more planting room. Now here's my second micro project for today that I identified earlier. If you recall, this whole bed used to be in complete shade from the caddo maple here and from this nuttall oak right here. It used to be completely shady. Well, then we had the ice storm and we had the Arctic blast, and I lost a lot of that shady canopy. So the conditions underneath here have changed over time, and now I'm having to accommodate those changes. So one thing I noticed was I had some fern growing up in here, and you can see where at one time it was probably happy here. Now you can see that the foliage is pretty burnt to a crisp. And so, and it's also from a design perspective, it's not really doing anything. This ground cover, this Vinca minor has already started to fill in, and these other shrubs have grown. So what I'm gonna do here, my second micro project, and I don't know, how much time has elapsed, Stuart? About 10 minutes? So see, if you don't have large chunks of time, you can still get something done. And I have a place where I am going to put this, and it's actually going to be in my window box in the back, which is very, very shady. So this will, again, not only make this area look less cluttered, but it's also a free plant, if you will, for my back garden. And I'm not having to go to the nursery and buy anything new. And I like that for many different reasons. One, I like free stuff, but number two, Stuart thinks that's funny, but also because since time is at such a premium right now, I like the fact that I don't have to go someplace to buy another plant to fill an absence in my back garden. So now I will take this, do the same thing with it, put it over here. I'll cut back some of that foliage that is browning and looks unhappy, and I will cut that back before I plant it. And by the way, again, both of these are going to be transplanted into a shadier location than they were previously. So I should be able to do that safely without stressing them out too much. So now this area looks a little bit better. Another micro project that I can do later is to take some soil conditioner or some compost to fill in this hole. And then this area will be less congested, and it will certainly appreciate, these other plants around here will certainly appreciate a dose of compost. So there you go. There was micro project number 2 that went pretty quickly. Okay, now micro project number 3, as long as I've got my handy hoe out. I'm going to get just a few weeds because everything is planted so densely. I don't have a lot of weed problems, but the few that I identify in the areas that I'm working, I will go ahead and slough those off. I've got a tree coming up in here, a little bit of privet coming up there. Okay, now on to micro project number 3. Again, it's helpful, you guys, if as you're walking around with your morning cup of coffee or your evening glass of wine, that you kind of identify these things so you can say to yourself, oh, I can get that done in just a few minutes, so that the next day you can get out there and get some things done. So right here, this was a privet that a bird planted here. I certainly wouldn't have ever planted privet, but a bird did that. And I have tried to make it kind of look like a boxwood by keeping it fairly well pruned, but now obviously it's setting out lots of these long branches, which is resisting the form that I had established for it earlier. So just with my scissors, I'm coming out here and I am reestablishing the form. So I guess this isn't a Wednesday walkabout. Is this a Wednesday workabout, Stuart? Workabout takes about that same amount of time. Okay, so now this looks considerably nicer. I need to get a little bit bigger pair of pruners for that. And the other thing that I'm going to do, because I think it doesn't need to be here any longer, it was a placeholder after all, or that's why I let it grow up, in another micro task. Later on, when I have a pot ready for it, I will dig this out and transplant it into a pot. Something else that I'm going to lose, because I think it looks a little bit too congested, and because it suffered serious damage in the ice storm, and unlike the Southern Living's Utopia yew, this is just a regular Japanese spreading yew, and it is not putting on a lot of new growth. I was hoping it would, but it's been very slow in pushing out any new foliage. And so what I think I'm going to do later is dig this out completely, because I think it's pretty unnecessary. The front yard is just getting overgrown and too cluttered. I do have a place I can transplant it, but because this is a little bit bigger, I think I'm gonna wait. But I've identified it because since I'm starting to think about bulb planting, and by the way, if you guys haven't ordered your bulbs, above I've got a card to my two favorite sources, Color Blends and Brex, and you can order them right now, because the longer you wait, the less availability of some of your favorite varieties are going to be there for you to order. So that could be one of your micro jobs. If you haven't already ordered your bulbs, you can do that. So I've identified this, that I am going to remove this a little bit later. And now here is my last micro job. That will also be kind of fun because I need it in the back. So as I said earlier, I love it when I can find something I already have to fill another need that I have identified. So I've got lots of boxwood going here, and they have really grown over time, grown so much that it has rendered some of them really unnecessary to my design. And by the way, this was a very loosey-goosey design. A lot of people ask me, how do I decide where to put the boxwood? And a lot of times it was just based on where it looked like there needed to be visual weight and evergreen weight. But now I've put a little too much weight on in the front yard, and I don't think this one is really necessary anymore. So I have a pot in the back. I lost a number of my large topiaries last year, some of my Green Mountain topiaries, and I've identified a place where I want to have a boxwood ball, but it has to be a Green Mountain, and I've got an extra Green Mountain here. And so I'm going to dig this one up, and again, it's kind of like know your own garden, and I know that I have been able to successfully transplant boxwoods at this time of year if they are being transplanted into the right location. And I think I can do that with this one. It might be a little bit of a gardening risk, but again, I assess my tolerance, my risk tolerance beforehand, and this is a risk I am willing to take. And by the way, you guys, and I'll try to put a link to a shovel like this. Stuart, you need to remind me. This is what I call a perennial shovel because it's got a smaller head on it, which really makes it wonderful for getting in these tight spaces. I use it far more than my regular shovel because it's easier for me to work with, and it's easier for me to use in really tight spaces. So this is going to create another spot. I was beginning, this is just so densely planted, you guys, that I was running out of places, even after the ice storm, to plant some of my large masses of bulbs. And this will, I think, enable them to showcase the bulbs a lot better. That came out very nicely and very cleanly, and it's got good round form. So I'm going to have a wonderful boxwood globe that I didn't pay anything for. This is why I love these sandals, you guys, because my feet can get really, really dirty, and I can just hose my feet off. Don't you hate it when you dig out a plant and then you've got on garden boots or something and all of the dirt falls inside your garden boots? That's one of my garden frustrations. So, look what has happened here, and I think it looks so much better. And I'll have now a place not only to plant bulbs this fall, but also there will be so much more room for growth and expansion of this lime mound spirea. So I am very happy about that. And probably I could have removed this, discarded it, and I would have barely noticed it, much less anyone else. So I think, Stuart, if you don't mind coming from this perspective, tell me, you guys, if you think it looks much better with that being gone there. And I now have more room to walk along the path. I might even remove that next one, who knows? But that will be a micro project for another day. Something else that I have identified, I'm running out of time now. I need to go pick up my husband. But a couple of other things that I've identified that will be micro projects for later. This double file viburnum right here did not die. It was a small tree before. It was beautiful. Last year was the first year it put out blooms, but it got crushed, died back all the way to the base, but it's coming back out again. So my next micro project will be to come out here with my pruners and reestablish some form to this, because it's just overgrown and it doesn't have that kind of pruned up tree form that I like. And then I'm also going to come over here and reassess this whole area of encore azaleas, because these are proving to be a beautiful ground cover for this whole area that just got denuded from the ice storm. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to reassess where I might want to move one from one location to another location, what I want to do about that. So I'll identify that for a micro project a little bit later, but I'm very, very thrilled. Look at all of the new growth this is putting out. Oh, here's another micro project right here. I have got an interventionist right here with this privet, an interloper, and I need to remove him. So those are 3 more micro projects that I've identified that I might tackle later this afternoon if I have 15 minutes. Maybe by then this area will be in shade. But if you don't have time for the big projects, try to identify some little micro things that you can do in your garden that will make you feel as if you're getting a little bit done, even though you're extremely busy. So if you have hung on this long, I appreciate it. And here is your fashion epilogue. If you're not interested, just make sure that you go on to the next video. So I'm getting ready to take Hubs to physical therapy and a doctor's appointment. So that's one reason I am working outside in a little bit nicer clothes than I normally would be. And of course, because it's so hot, these are really, really loose. So my sunglasses came from Nordstrom Rack. They are, I don't know what brand they are, but they're American Armani Exchange from Nordstrom Rack. My bag came off of Amazon, and what I like about this textured weave is that it's kind of like a segue into fall. It looks both summery and fallish, I think. And if I can find one, I'll put a link below. My top, I actually got at Burlington Coat Factory, but it is part of the Any Day Target line. I love it because it's just so loose. These breeches I have worn before. They They have pockets. I love them. They are part of the Any Day collection from Target, and I got these in 2 different colors. And finally, my shoes. I have slipped out of my garden working shoes into these platforms that I think are really, really cute, and I got these years ago from Forever 21. So there you go. There's your fashion ensemble du jour.